The wind howled mercilessly across the barren Wyoming landscape, carrying with it a fury of snow that obliterated the horizon and buried everything in its path. Katherine Winters clutched her thin woolen coat tighter around her trembling body, her fingers numb despite the gloves she wore. The stagecoach that had been carrying her to Rivercrest had lost a wheel an hour ago, and the driver and other passengers had decided to press on to the nearest way station on foot. Katherine had fallen behind, her city boots ill-suited for trudging through knee-deep snow, and now she was hopelessly lost in the blinding whiteness of the February blizzard of 1873. "Hello," she called out, her voice immediately swallowed by the howling wind. "Is anyone there?" Her legs felt like lead, each step more difficult than the last. The temperature was dropping rapidly as dusk approached, and Katherine knew with grim certainty that if she didn't find shelter soon, she wouldn't survive the night. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her. She had left Boston to escape death, only to find it waiting for her in the wild frontier of Wyoming territory. Katherine stumbled, falling face first into the snow. The momentary relief from the stinging wind almost made her want to stay there, to give in to the strange warmth that had begun to spread through her limbs despite the cold. She remembered reading somewhere that this was how people froze to death. They got warm, fell asleep, and never woke up. "No," she muttered, forcing herself back to her feet. "Not like this." She pressed forward, but the world was beginning to swim before her eyes. The howling wind seemed to form words now, calling to her. Was that a hallucination, or was someone actually shouting, "Hey, over here"? The voice was deep, masculine, and very real. Katherine tried to turn toward it, but her legs finally gave out. As she crumpled into the snow, she caught a glimpse of a figure on horseback emerging from the curtain of white. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a pair of concerned blue eyes peering down at her from beneath the brim of a snow-covered hat. Quinn McBride had seen a lot of death in his 30 years during the war, in mining accidents, from disease and the harsh frontier winters, but he'd be damned if he'd let another soul perish in a blizzard on his watch. He'd been tracking a stray from his herd when he spotted what looked like a person staggering through the snow. Now, as he knelt beside the half-frozen woman, he checked for signs of life with bated breath. "Thank the Lord," he muttered when he felt a faint pulse at her neck. She was alive, but barely. Quinn didn't waste time wondering what a city woman, and she was clearly from back east, judging by her clothes, was doing out here alone in a blizzard. Questions could wait. Survival couldn't. He scooped her up in his arms, surprised at how light she felt despite her sodden clothes. Her skin was frighteningly pale, with an alarming bluish tint to her lips. Quinn carried her to his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Samson, who stood patiently in the storm. "Easy, boy," Quinn murmured as he mounted, keeping the unconscious woman secure in his arms. "We need to get her home, and quick." The ride back to his ranch was tense. The woman remained unconscious, and Quinn could feel the dangerous chill of her body even through his heavy sheepskin coat. He urged Samson faster, knowing every minute counted. His ranch was still a good 2 miles away, but it was the closest shelter for miles around. "Hang on," he told the woman, though he doubted she could hear him. "Just hang on." The Quinn McBride ranch came into view like a beacon in the storm, a sturdy 2-story house built of logs and stone, with warm yellow light spilling from the windows. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth within. Quinn had never been so glad to see his home. He dismounted carefully, keeping the woman cradled against his chest, and trudged through the snow to the front door. He managed to push it open with his shoulder. "Sarah," he called out to his housekeeper. "Sarah, I need help." Sarah Blackwood, a stout woman in her 50s who had been with Quinn since he established the ranch 5 years ago, came hurrying from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of the unconscious woman in Quinn's arms. "Lord have mercy," she gasped. "Who is she?" "Don't know," Quinn replied, already moving toward the sitting room where a fire blazed in the hearth. "Found her half frozen in the snow about 2 miles out. Get some blankets and heat some water. We need to warm her up slow and steady." Sarah nodded and hurried off while Quinn gently laid the woman on the sofa near the fire. He removed her snow-crusted hat, revealing hair the color of burnished copper. Even matted with snow and ice, it was beautiful. Quinn carefully unbuttoned her sodden coat, knowing the wet clothes would only keep the cold against her skin. Sarah returned with an armful of blankets and a concerned expression. "You'll need to get her out of those wet things, Mr. McBride. I'll take care of it, you go see to Samson." Quinn nodded gratefully and left the woman in Sarah's capable hands. He went back outside to lead his horse to the barn, his mind still on the mysterious woman he'd rescued. Who was she? What was she doing out in that blizzard alone, and would she survive the night? After ensuring Samson was comfortable in his stall with extra feed for his efforts, Quinn returned to the house. He stamped the snow from his boots and hung his coat by the door before heading to the sitting room. Sarah had changed the woman into one of Quinn's own nightshirts, which was comically large on her slender frame, and had wrapped her in every blanket they owned. Her wet clothes were hung near the fire to dry. "How is she?" Quinn asked, his voice low. "Still breathing," Sarah replied. "But she's colder than ice. I've sent Billy to fetch Dr. Reynolds." Quinn frowned. Billy was the 14-year-old stable boy who lived with them. "You sent him out in this storm." "He took the sleigh and followed the rope line to town," Sarah said defensively. "The doctor needs to see her, Mr. McBride. I don't like the color of her." Quinn couldn't argue with that. The woman's skin was still unnaturally pale, with patches of angry red where frostbite threatened. "I put some broth on," Sarah continued. "If she wakes, we should try to get some in her, warm her from the inside out." Quinn nodded, pulling a chair closer to the sofa. "I'll sit with her. You go finish whatever you were doing." Sarah hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Go on." After Sarah left, Quinn studied the woman more closely. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, with delicate features that spoke of gentle breeding. Her hands, though chapped from the cold, showed no signs of hard labor. Definitely a city woman. But what was she doing in Wyoming territory? As if sensing his scrutiny, the woman stirred slightly. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened, revealing eyes of a startling emerald green. She blinked several times, confusion evident in her gaze as it darted around the unfamiliar room before settling on Quinn. "Where?" she began, her voice a raspy whisper. "You're safe," Quinn assured her. "You're at my ranch about 20 miles outside of Rivercrest. I found you in the snow during the blizzard." She tried to sit up but winced in pain. Quinn gently pressed her back down. "Easy now. You're suffering from exposure. Best to lie still until the doctor comes." "Doctor?" she echoed weakly. "He's on his way," Quinn said, hoping it was true. "I'm Quinn McBride. This is my ranch you're at." She licked her chapped lips. "Katherine Winters," she managed. "Thank you for saving me." "Just happened to be in the right place at the right time," Quinn said with a modest shrug. "Can you tell me what you were doing out there alone, Miss Winters?" Katherine closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering her strength. "The stagecoach lost a wheel. Others went ahead to find help." "I fell behind." Quinn's jaw tightened. "They left you?" "Not intentionally. I couldn't keep up. My fault." Quinn disagreed but kept his opinion to himself. Leaving anyone behind in a blizzard was as good as a death sentence, and the stagecoach driver should have known better. "Well, you're safe now," he said instead. "Rest. We'll talk more when you're stronger." Katherine nodded weakly, her eyes already closing. Quinn watched as she drifted back to sleep, her breathing shallow but steady. He settled back in his chair, prepared for a long vigil. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but inside Quinn McBride's ranch house, Katherine Winters had found sanctuary and the man who would change her life forever, though neither of them knew it yet. Katherine drifted in and out of consciousness throughout the night. Each time she woke, she found Quinn McBride still there, keeping watch. Sometimes he was reading by lamplight, sometimes stoking the fire, but always present. His steadfast vigilance provided an odd comfort in her pain and confusion. By morning, the blizzard had subsided to gentle snowfall. Katherine awoke feeling stronger, though her extremities burned with a fiery pain that brought tears to her eyes. "That's a good sign," said a voice she didn't recognize. Katherine turned her head to see an elderly man with spectacles and a kind face setting a black medical bag on a nearby table. Quinn stood behind him, his expression concerned. The pain means blood's flowing back to your fingers and toes, the doctor continued. I'm Dr. Reynolds. Your guardian angel here fetched me at first light. Katherine tried to smile, but her cracked lips made it painful. Thank you, doctor. Don't thank me yet, he replied soberly. You've got some frostbite on your fingers and toes, maybe your ears too. Won't know how bad until the swelling goes down. Fear clutched at Katherine's heart. Will I lose any? Dr. Reynolds patted her hand. Let's not borrow trouble. You're young and healthy, which counts for a lot. And Mr. McBride here did everything right, warmed you gradually, kept you dry. Another hour out there, and we'd be having a different conversation entirely. Katherine looked past the doctor to Quinn, who stood somewhat awkwardly by the doorway. Then I owe Mr. McBride my life. Quinn shifted uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same. Not anyone, Dr. Reynolds corrected, packing up his bag. Most would have passed by, especially in that storm. He turned back to Katherine. Rest, stay warm, and drink plenty of fluids. I've left some laudanum for the pain. I'll come back in a few days to check on you, but send for me if the pain gets worse or if any of your fingers or toes turn black. After the doctor left, Sarah brought in a tray with a bowl of steaming broth and some soft bread. Think you can manage some food, miss? She asked. Katherine nodded, trying to sit up. Quinn moved quickly to her side, helping to arrange pillows behind her back. His hands were strong and sure, yet gentle. Katherine was acutely aware of his proximity, of the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. Thank you, she murmured. Quinn nodded and stepped back, allowing Sarah to place the tray across Katherine's lap. I'll leave you to your breakfast, he said. I've got chores to attend to, but Sarah will be nearby if you need anything. Before Katherine could respond, he was gone, his long strides carrying him swiftly from the room. Sarah chuckled softly. Don't mind him, she said. Mr. McBride's not much for idle conversation. But he sat with you all night, wouldn't hear of leaving you alone. Katherine felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the blankets around her or the fire in the hearth. He seems like a good man. The best, Sarah agreed. Now eat up, you need your strength. The broth was rich and flavorful, the bread soft enough that Katherine could manage it despite her chapped lips. By the time she finished, exhaustion was pulling at her again, and she sank back against the pillows. You rest now, Sarah said, removing the tray. When you wake, perhaps you'd like a proper bath. I've heated water, and I imagine you'd feel better cleaned up. Katherine nodded gratefully, already drifting off to sleep. When she next awoke, the light in the room had changed, suggesting it was late afternoon. True to her word, Sarah had prepared a bath in a small room off the kitchen. With the older woman's help, Katherine managed to wash away the lingering chill of her ordeal. Her fingers and toes still throbbed painfully, but the hot water brought some relief. Sarah had found some clothes that might fit her, left by Mr. McBride's sister last time she visited, she explained. The simple calico dress was a bit loose but clean and warm, and Katherine felt more like herself once dressed. Much better, Sarah approved, helping Katherine back to the sitting room where the sofa had been made up with fresh linens. You've got some color back in your cheeks now, Katherine smiled, genuinely this time. I feel almost human again. Good enough to receive a visitor. Quinn's deep voice came from the doorway. He had cleaned up as well, his dark hair damp and neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaved. Of course, Katherine replied, suddenly self-conscious of her own appearance. Her hair had been hastily braided by Sarah, and she wore no cosmetics. She must look a fright. Quinn didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he was too polite to show it. He sat in the chair opposite her, his posture straight but not stiff. I wanted to check on you, he said, and to let you know I sent word to Rivercrest about the stagecoach accident. They're sending men out to look for the others. Katherine's eyes widened. I hadn't even thought. Do you think they made it? Hard to say, Quinn replied honestly. Depends on how far they got before the worst of the storm hit. But the way station's only about 5 miles from where I found you, so if they kept going straight, they had a decent chance. Katherine nodded, hoping the driver and her fellow passengers had fared as well as she had. She wouldn't wish her experience on anyone. I also asked about your belongings, Quinn continued, If they find the stagecoach, they'll bring your trunk here. That's very thoughtful of you, Katherine said, though I'm afraid I'm imposing terribly. Dr. Reynolds said I shouldn't travel for at least a week. Quinn waved away her concern. It's no imposition. The guest room upstairs will be ready for you by tonight. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. Katherine felt tears prick at her eyes. This man, this stranger, had not only saved her life, but was now offering his home to her without hesitation. It was a kindness she hadn't expected to find so far from civilization. Thank you, she said softly. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Quinn's eyes, the color of a summer sky, met hers directly. No repayment necessary, Miss Winters, just get well. There was something in his gaze, something warm and steady that made Katherine feel safer than she had in months. It was a dangerous feeling. She had come west to escape the past, not to form new attachments. But as Quinn McBride sat quietly with her, asking gentle questions about her journey and sharing stories of his own travels, Katherine found herself drawn to his unassuming strength and quiet intelligence. By the time Sarah called them to dinner, Katherine knew she was in trouble. Quinn McBride wasn't just her rescuer, he was becoming something more, something potentially far more dangerous to her carefully constructed plans. But as he helped her to the dining room, his hand warm and solid under her elbow, Katherine couldn't bring herself to care about plans. For now, she was alive, she was warm, and she was in the company of a man who had risked his life to save hers. The future, with all its complications, could wait. The days passed in a haze of recovery for Katherine. Her frostbitten fingers and toes healed slowly but steadily, each day bringing less pain and more mobility. Dr. Reynolds visited twice more, expressing satisfaction with her progress and assuring her that she would retain full use of her extremities, a miracle, he called it, or a testament to Mr. McBride's quick thinking. Quinn himself proved to be an attentive but unobtrusive host. During the day, he attended to his ranch duties, leaving Katherine in Sarah's capable care. But in the evenings, he would join her by the fire, sometimes reading aloud from one of the many books that lined his shelves, sometimes sharing stories of his life in the West. Katherine learned that Quinn had come to Wyoming after the war, using the money he'd saved from his soldiers' pay to purchase land and start a modest cattle operation. Over 5 years, he had built it into one of the most respected ranches in the territory. It wasn't easy, he admitted one evening, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames in the hearth. That first winter nearly broke me, lost half my herd to the cold, would have lost everything if not for Sarah and her husband. Katherine asked, glancing toward the kitchen where Sarah was preparing their evening meal. Quinn's expression sobered. Tom Blackwood, good man, he was my foreman until 2 years ago. Pneumonia took him. I'm sorry, Katherine said softly. Sarah never mentioned. She wouldn't, Quinn replied. Not one to dwell on sorrows, but that's why she and Billy stay on here. This place is as much theirs as it is mine. Katherine nodded, understanding better now the easy familiarity between Quinn and his housekeeper. It wasn't merely an employer-employee relationship, but one forged in shared hardship and loss. On the 4th day of her stay, Katherine's trunk arrived from the stagecoach company, along with news that the driver and other passengers had indeed reached the way station safely. Katherine was relieved to hear it, though part of her resented the driver for leaving her behind. If not for Quinn, she would have died in that blizzard. With her own clothes now available, Katherine felt more herself. She was well enough to move about the house freely, though she tired easily. She took to helping Sarah with small tasks, folding laundry, preparing vegetables for meals, anything that wouldn't strain her still tender fingers. One afternoon, as she was arranging wildflowers Sarah had brought in from the greenhouse Quinn maintained at the side of the house, Quinn returned early from his work. He stood in the doorway of the sitting room, watching her for a moment before she noticed him. Those look nice, he said when she finally looked up. Katherine smiled, pleased by his approval. Sarah said you grow them year-round in your greenhouse. It's quite remarkable. Quinn shrugged, moving into the room to stand beside her. My mother loved flowers. Even in winter, she insisted on having something blooming in the house. When I built this place, the greenhouse seemed as necessary as the barn. Katherine studied his profile as he gently touched one of the blossoms. There was a tenderness there that belied his rugged exterior. Your mother must be proud of what you've built here. A shadow crossed his face. She didn't live to see it. Yellow fever took both my parents just after the war ended. I'm sorry, Katherine said, instinctively reaching out to touch his arm. I know what it's like to lose family. Quinn covered her hand with his own, his skin warm and slightly rough. Who did you lose, Katherine? It was the first time he had used her given name, and it sent an unexpected thrill through her. My father, last year, influenza. What she didn't say was that her father's death had left her at the mercy of her uncle, a man whose interest in her went far beyond appropriate familial concern. Her journey west wasn't just about starting fresh, it was about escape. Quinn seemed to sense there was more to the story but didn't press. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. I'm heading into town tomorrow, he said. Is there anything you need? Katherine thought for a moment. Perhaps some paper and ink. I should write to my friend in Rivercrest, let her know I'm delayed but well. Quinn nodded. Consider it done. Anything else? Katherine hesitated, then shook her head. What she really wanted couldn't be purchased in town. She wanted more time in this peaceful house, with Sarah's motherly fussing and Quinn's quiet strength. Time before she had to face the reality of her situation, that she was a woman alone in a wild territory with limited funds and few prospects. Just the paper and ink, she said finally. Thank you. Quinn studied her face for a moment as if trying to read her thoughts, then he nodded again and turned to leave. At the doorway, he paused. We're having some neighbors over for dinner tomorrow night, he said. The Hendersons from the next ranch over. Good people. Thought you might enjoy some company besides an old bachelor and his housekeeper. Katherine smiled, touched by his consideration. That sounds lovely, and you're hardly old, Mr. McBride. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Quinn, he corrected. If I'm using your given name, seems only fair you use mine. Quinn, Katherine repeated, liking the feel of it on her tongue. His smile widened, transforming his face from merely handsome to heart-stopping. Till tomorrow then, Katherine. After he left, Katherine sat down, her heart beating a rapid tattoo against her ribs. This wouldn't do at all. She couldn't afford to develop feelings for Quinn McBride, no matter how kind or handsome he might be. Her plan had been clear. Reach Rivercrest, stay with her childhood friend Eliza until she found employment as a teacher or governess, and build an independent life far from Boston and her uncle's reach. Falling for a rancher wasn't part of that plan. It would only complicate matters, potentially leaving her vulnerable again. No, she would enjoy her remaining time at the McBride Ranch and then continue on to Rivercrest as soon as Dr. Reynolds declared her fit for travel. But as she returned to arranging the flowers, Katherine couldn't help wondering what it might be like to stay, to become part of the life Quinn had built here. It was a dangerous thought, but one that refused to be dismissed entirely. Quinn returned from town the following afternoon with not only the requested paper and ink, but also a small package wrapped in brown paper. He found Katherine in the sitting room, reading one of his books. For you, he said, handing her both the writing materials and the package. Katherine looked up in surprise. What's this? Open it and see, Quinn replied, a hint of nervousness in his usually confident demeanor. Katherine carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a small bottle of rose-scented toilet water and a pretty ivory comb for her hair. Simple gifts, but thoughtful ones. Quinn, she breathed, looking up at him. This is too much. He shook his head. Sarah mentioned you were missing your personal items. Thought these might help until you reach your friend in Rivercrest. The reminder of her imminent departure stung more than it should have. Thank you, she said softly. They're perfect. Quinn looked pleased, if somewhat embarrassed by her gratitude. The Hendersons will be here at 6, he said, changing the subject. Sarah's cooking up a storm. As if on cue, the smell of roasting meat and baking bread wafted in from the kitchen. It smells wonderful, Katherine commented. Is there anything I can do to help? Just enjoy yourself, Quinn said. You're still recovering. But Katherine insisted on at least setting the table, an activity her healing hands could manage. As she arranged Quinn's surprisingly fine china and silverware, she found herself wondering about the woman who had chosen these things. Had Quinn's mother selected them? Or had there been a woman in Quinn's life at some point, a sweetheart or fiancé who had helped furnish his home? She hadn't dared ask about his past relationships, though Sarah had let slip that Quinn had never married. "Married to this ranch, he is," the housekeeper had said with a fond but exasperated shake of her head. Though Lord knows it's not for lack of trying on the local lady's part, Katherine could well believe it. Quinn McBride was the kind of man any sensible woman would want: strong, kind, reliable, and handsome to boot. The fact that he owned a successful ranch only added to his appeal. The Hendersons arrived promptly at 6 John Henderson, a ruddy-faced man in his 40s with a booming laugh, his wife Martha, a pleasant woman with prematurely gray hair, and their daughter Abigail, a pretty girl of about 16 who regarded Quinn with undisguised admiration. Katherine felt an unexpected pang of jealousy at the way the girl blushed when Quinn took her coat, but she quickly suppressed it. What right did she have to feel possessive of a man she had known less than a week? Dinner was a lively affair. The Hendersons were friendly and curious, asking Katherine about her journey west and her plans in Rivercrest. Katherine kept her answers vague, mentioning only that she had come to visit a childhood friend and perhaps find employment. "A teacher, are you?" John Henderson asked between bites of Sarah's excellent roast beef. "I was a governess in Boston," Katherine replied, "but I'm certified to teach in a school setting as well." "Well now, ain't that something?" Henderson said, turning to Quinn. "Didn't you say the town council's looking for a new teacher for the spring term? Old Miss Perkins is retiring." Quinn nodded, his eyes meeting Katherine's across the table. "That's right. The school in Rivercrest is small, but they pay decently, better than most frontier towns." Katherine felt a flutter of excitement. "Is it really? Do you think they might consider me?" "Why wouldn't they?" Quinn asked. "You're educated, experienced. I'd be happy to write a letter of recommendation." Katherine blinked in surprise. "You would, but you hardly know me." A smile played at the corners of Quinn's mouth. "I'd say saving someone's life gives a fair insight into their character. Besides, anyone who can discuss Shakespeare as intelligently as you did last night is more than qualified to teach reading to frontier children." Katherine felt herself blushing under his praise. Their conversation about King Lear the previous evening had been one of the most stimulating intellectual exchanges she'd had in years. Quinn might be a rancher, but he was well-read and thoughtful, with insights that had both surprised and delighted her. "That's very kind of you," she said softly. Martha Henderson watched this exchange with keen interest. "How long will you be staying with Mr. McBride, Miss Winters?" "Until Dr. Reynolds declares her fit for travel," Quinn answered before Katherine could. "Another week at least, I'd imagine," Martha murmured, exchanging a knowing glance with her husband. "Well, we're certainly glad you're recovering so well. It was a miracle Mr. McBride found you when he did." "Yes," Katherine agreed, looking at Quinn with genuine gratitude. "A miracle indeed." The rest of the evening passed pleasantly. After dinner, they gathered in the sitting room where Abigail, at her mother's urging, played the piano. The girl was talented, and Katherine found herself moved by the simple melodies she chose. "Do you play, Miss Winters?" Martha asked when her daughter finished. "A little," Katherine admitted, "though I'm afraid my fingers aren't quite up to it yet." "Perhaps before you leave," Quinn suggested. "I'd like to hear you play." The way he looked at her made Katherine's breath catch. There was something in his eyes, a warmth, an interest that went beyond mere politeness. It both thrilled and terrified her. After the Hendersons departed, Katherine helped Sarah clear away the last of the dessert dishes, despite the older woman's protests. "You're a guest, Miss Winters," Sarah insisted. "You shouldn't be working." "Nonsense," Katherine replied. "I've been idle for days. It feels good to be useful." Sarah studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Well, I won't say the help isn't appreciated. Between the cooking and the cleaning, these dinner parties wear me out more than they used to." As they worked side by side, Sarah spoke of her life at the ranch, of her late husband Tom, and of Quinn's kindness after Tom's death. "He insisted Billy and I stay on," she said. "Said this place wouldn't be the same without us." Paid for Billy's schooling in town too, though the boy's more interested in horses than books. "He seems like a good man," Katherine said, trying to keep her tone casual. Sarah gave her a knowing look. "The best, and lonely, though he'd never admit it." She paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "The way he looks at you, I haven't seen that look in his eyes before." Katherine felt her cheeks warm. "You're imagining things. He's simply being kind to someone in need." "If you say so," Sarah replied, clearly unconvinced. "But I've known Quinn McBride for 5 years, and kindness alone doesn't explain the way he lit up when you came downstairs tonight in that blue dress." Katherine had no response to that. She had noticed his reaction when she'd entered the sitting room before dinner, wearing the nicest of the dresses she'd brought west. His eyes had widened, and he'd stumbled over his words while introducing her to the Hendersons. But she'd attributed it to surprise at seeing her fully recovered, not to any particular admiration for her appearance. Could Sarah be right? Was Quinn developing feelings for her? And if so, what should she do about it? These questions followed Katherine upstairs to the guest room, where she prepared for bed. As she brushed her hair with the new comb Quinn had given her, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror above the dresser. The woman who looked back at her seemed different from the one who had left Boston. There was color in her cheeks, a brightness in her eyes that had been missing for months, maybe years. Was that Quinn's influence? Or simply the effect of escaping her uncle's oppressive household? Katherine didn't know, but as she climbed into bed, she found herself hoping that Dr. Reynolds wouldn't declare her fit for travel too soon. She wasn't ready to leave this house or the man who had saved her life. The following morning brought clear skies and warmer temperatures. The snow was beginning to melt, creating rivulets that carved paths through the remaining drifts. Katherine stood at the window of her room, watching as Quinn and a couple of ranch hands moved cattle from one pasture to another, their horses cutting through the snow with practiced ease. Even from a distance, she could identify Quinn immediately. Something about the set of his shoulders, the way he sat his horse. He rode with a natural grace that spoke of years in the saddle. As she watched, he threw his head back in laughter at something one of the hands said, and the sound carried faintly to her window. A knock at her door pulled her attention away from the scene. "Come in," she called. Sarah entered, carrying a tray with breakfast. "Thought you might like to eat up here this morning," she said. "It's warmer than the dining room with all the men coming and going." "Thank you," Katherine said, moving to take the tray, "but I could have come down. I'm feeling much stronger today." Sarah shrugged. "No harm in taking it easy a bit longer." She glanced out the window, following Katherine's earlier gaze. "He's something to watch, isn't he? Way he handles that horse, you'd think they were one creature." Katherine felt herself blushing at being so transparent. "He seems very capable." "Born in the saddle, that one," Sarah agreed. "His father had a small horse farm in Kentucky before the war. Quinn grew up riding almost before he could walk, from what he tells." Kentucky explained the slight southern inflection Katherine had detected in Quinn's speech, not quite a drawl, but a softness around certain vowels that distinguished it from her own crisp Boston accent. "Which side did he fight for?" Katherine asked, curious. "The war had ended 8 years ago, but its divisions still ran deep." "Union," Sarah replied. "Though his father owned slaves, Quinn never held with it, caused quite a rift between them from what I understand. They reconciled before his father died, thank the Lord." Katherine nodded, relieved. Though she tried not to judge people by their wartime allegiances, too many good men had fought on both sides. She would have found it difficult to reconcile her growing feelings for Quinn if he had fought to preserve slavery. "The doctor's coming by this afternoon," Sarah continued, moving to straighten the already tidy room. "Said he wants to check those fingers and toes one more time." Katherine flexed her hands. The pain had subsided to occasional twinges, and the redness had faded considerably. "I think he'll be pleased with my progress." "I expect so," Sarah agreed. "You've healed up right nice." She paused, giving Katherine a sidelong glance. Course, that don't mean you need to rush off to Rivercrest. Winter's a hard time to travel, even without blizzards. Katherine heard the subtle invitation in Sarah's words. The older woman wanted her to stay, at least for a while longer. The thought was tempting more than tempting. But was it wise? I wouldn't want to impose, Katherine said carefully. Quinn, Mr. McBride, has already been more than generous. Sarah snorted. Impose, girl, this house hasn't felt so alive in years, and the way Mr. McBride's been whistling while he works, well, I haven't heard that since we first built this place. She moved to the door, then turned back with a knowing look. Just think about it, that's all I'm saying. No need to rush decisions. After Sarah left, Katherine ate her breakfast slowly, considering the housekeeper's words. Could she stay longer? Should she? The practical part of her mind reminded her that she had limited funds and needed to secure employment soon, but her heart wanted to remain in this house, with its books and piano and the man who had saved her life. Dr. Reynolds arrived in the early afternoon, just as Quinn and his men were returning from their morning's work. Katherine received the doctor in the sitting room, where he examined her hands and feet with professional thoroughness. Remarkable, he pronounced, sitting back. I've seen cases half as severe that resulted in lost digits. You're a fortunate young woman, Miss Winters. I know, Katherine agreed. If Mr. McBride hadn't found me when he did. Indeed. The doctor packed his instruments back into his bag. Well, I'm pleased to say you're fully recovered. The tenderness will persist for a while, but there's no lasting damage. You're fit to travel whenever you wish. Katherine felt a conflicting surge of relief and disappointment. Thank you, doctor. When do you plan to leave for Rivercrest? He asked conversationally. Before Katherine could answer, Quinn's voice came from the doorway. There's no rush, is there, Doc? The stage only runs twice a week, and with the snow melting, the roads will be mud pits for days. Dr. Reynolds nodded. True enough. Probably best to wait until next week at least, let the roads firm up a bit. Katherine looked from the doctor to Quinn, who stood leaning against the doorframe, his expression unreadable. I wouldn't want to overstay my welcome, she said. No chance of that, Quinn replied immediately. Besides, I was hoping you might play the piano for us, now that your fingers are healed, and I still need to write that letter of recommendation for the teaching position. It was the thinnest of pretexts, and they all knew it. Dr. Reynolds coughed discreetly and rose to his feet. Well, I'll leave you two to sort out the details. Miss Winters, I'm delighted by your recovery. Mr. McBride, always a pleasure. After the doctor left, Quinn moved further into the room, taking the seat the doctor had vacated. You don't have to stay if you don't want to, he said quietly. I can arrange transportation to Rivercrest whenever you're ready, but I meant what I said. You're welcome here for as long as you like. Katherine studied his face, trying to read his intentions. What she saw there made her heart beat faster, hope, warmth, and something deeper that she wasn't ready to name. Why? She asked simply. Quinn looked surprised by the question. Why what? Why would you want me to stay? You don't know anything about me, about my past, about why I came west. Quinn was silent for a moment, considering. I know enough, he finally said. I know you're intelligent, kind, and brave. I know you've suffered some kind of loss and that you're running from something or someone back east. When Katherine started to protest, he held up a hand. You don't have to tell me what or who. That's your business. But I also know that since you've been here, this house has felt more like a home than it has in years. His honesty left her speechless. It would be so easy to accept his invitation to stay in this peaceful place with this good man. But could she do that without being honest in return? Didn't he deserve to know what kind of woman he was welcoming into his home? I should tell you why I left Boston, she said slowly. Quinn shook his head. Not unless you want to. The past is the past, Katherine. Out here, people get second chances. That's why most of us came west in the first place. His understanding nearly undid her. Tears pricked at her eyes and she blinked them away. What would I do here? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not a ranch wife. I don't know the first thing about cattle or frontier living. A smile touched Quinn's lips. You'd learn if that's what you wanted, or you could teach. Rivercrest's only 10 miles away by the main road, close enough to ride in daily once the weather improves. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I'm not asking for any promises, Catherine, just some time. Time for both of us to figure out if there might be something worth building here. The way he looked at her made it impossible to doubt his sincerity. This wasn't mere physical attraction speaking, nor was it pity for a woman in distress. Quinn McBride was offering her something she had never expected to find in the wild territory of Wyoming, a chance at happiness on her own terms. A week, she said finally. I'll stay another week after that. We'll see. Quinn's smile broadened, lighting his entire face. A week it is. He stood, as if afraid she might change her mind if the conversation continued. I'd better get cleaned up for dinner. Sarah's making her famous stew, and she gets cross if we're late to the table. As he left, Catherine sat back in her chair, wondering if she had just made the wisest decision of her life or the most foolish. Only time would tell. A week wasn't so very long, after all. 7 days to determine the course of her future. 7 days to decide if Quinn McBride was a man she could trust with her heart. 7 days that would change everything. The week Catherine had agreed to stay stretched into 2, then 3. February gave way to March, bringing warmer days, though the nights remained cold. The snow melted completely, leaving behind muddy roads that gradually dried under the strengthening sun. Each day that passed gave Catherine another reason to postpone her departure for Rivercrest. There was the day Quinn taught her to ride, patiently instructing her on a gentle mare named Daisy. Catherine had ridden in Boston's parks, but side-saddle on groomed paths was nothing like riding astride across open Wyoming rangeland. She had been terrified at first, then exhilarated as she gained confidence under Quinn's watchful guidance. "You're a natural," he had told her, his blue eyes warm with approval as she mastered a trot without bouncing in the saddle. There was the evening she finally played the piano for him, her fingers moving smoothly over the keys as she performed Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Quinn had listened with rapt attention, and when she finished, the look of wonder on his face had made her heart swell. "That was beautiful," he had said simply, "like having a piece of civilization right here in my sitting room." There were the afternoons spent helping Sarah in the kitchen, learning to make sourdough bread and venison stew. The mornings spent in Quinn's small but well-stocked library, discovering books she had never encountered in Boston. The evenings by the fire, talking about everything and nothing as the hours slipped away unnoticed. And through it all, there was Quinn himself, steady, kind, and increasingly dear to her. He never pressed her about her past, never demanded more than she was willing to give. But his feelings were clear in 100 small ways. The fresh flowers that appeared in her room each week, the way he sought her opinion on ranch matters, the lingering glances when he thought she wasn't looking. Catherine knew she was falling in love with him. What terrified her was that she hadn't been completely honest about her reasons for coming west. Quinn deserved the truth, but every time she resolved to tell him, fear stopped her. What if the truth changed how he saw her? What if he blamed her for her uncle's actions, as so many would? These thoughts troubled her as she sat on the front porch one mild March afternoon, a book open but unread in her lap. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention to the road, where a rider was approaching at a steady pace. Not Quinn, who had ridden out with his men to check on a pregnant heifer. This rider was smaller, and as they drew closer, Catherine was surprised to see it was a woman. The rider reached the house and dismounted with practiced ease. She was a striking woman in her 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid and keen eyes that assessed Catherine with open curiosity. "Hello," the woman called, approaching the porch. "You must be Miss Winters. I'm Josephine Cooper, Quinn's neighbor to the east." Catherine rose, setting aside her book. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Cooper. Quinn has mentioned you." Josephine laughed, a rich, throaty sound. "Miss Cooper actually never married, and please call me Joe, everyone does." She mounted the porch steps with confident strides. "I've been meaning to ride over and meet you, but spring calving keeps me busy. Is Quinn around?" "He's out checking on a heifer," Catherine replied. "But please come in. Sarah just made fresh coffee." Joe followed her inside, removing her hat and gloves. She was dressed practically in a split riding skirt and sturdy blouse, with a pistol holstered at her hip that she removed and set carefully on a side table before entering the sitting room. "So," Joe said once they were settled with coffee, "you're the woman Quinn pulled half frozen from the snow." "You're looking remarkably well for someone who nearly died." Katherine smiled, liking Joe's directness. "I was fortunate. Another hour out there and we wouldn't be having this conversation." "Quinn's got a knack for being in the right place at the right time," Joe agreed. "Saved one of my hands from a rattlesnake last summer. Man was certain he was a goner, but Quinn got him back to the ranch and sucked the venom out before it could spread." She sipped her coffee, studying Katherine over the rim of her cup. "He's a good man, Quinn McBride." "Yes," Katherine agreed softly. "He is." Joe's shrewd eyes missed nothing. "You care for him." It wasn't a question, but Katherine answered anyway. "Very much. And he cares for you. Martha Henderson says she's never seen him so taken with anyone." Joe set down her cup with deliberate care. "Which is why I rode over today, to make sure you're not just passing through, using Quinn as a convenient shelter until something better comes along." Katherine stiffened at the implied accusation. "My intentions toward Quinn are honorable, Miss Cooper, not that it's any of your business." To her surprise, Joe grinned. "Good, you've got spine, you'll need it out here." She leaned forward, her expression turning serious. "Look, I don't mean to pry, but Quinn's my friend, one of the few people in this territory I trust completely. I don't want to see him hurt." Katherine's indignation faded as quickly as it had risen. Joe wasn't being nosy, she was being protective of someone she cared about. It was hard to fault her for that. "I understand," Katherine said, "and I appreciate your concern for him, but I assure you the last thing I want to do is hurt Quinn." Joe studied her for a long moment, then nodded, apparently satisfied. "Fair enough. So what's your story, Miss Winters? What brings a Boston lady to Wyoming territory?" Katherine hesitated, then decided that perhaps practicing on Joe might make it easier to eventually tell Quinn. "I came to escape a difficult situation," she began carefully. "My father died last year, leaving me in the care of his brother, my Uncle Frederick." Joe waited silently as Katherine gathered her thoughts. "My uncle, his interest in me was inappropriate." "Nothing happened," she added quickly, seeing Joe's expression darken, "but his intentions were clear. When he suggested we marry, I knew I had to leave Boston. He wanted to marry his own niece." Joe's disgust was evident. "That's not technically illegal," Katherine finished. "We're not blood relations. He married my father's sister who died years ago, but it was repulsive to me, and when I refused him, he became insistent, said I had nowhere else to go, no means of support." She looked down at her hands, remembering the fear of those days. "He was right about that much. My father left substantial debts, and most of our property was sold to satisfy his creditors. I had only a small inheritance from my mother, barely enough for passage west and a few months' expenses." "So you ran," Joe said, without judgment. Katherine nodded. "My childhood friend Eliza had moved to Rivercrest with her husband 2 years ago. She wrote that there might be opportunities for a teacher there. It seemed like Providence. And then the blizzard hit, and Providence sent Quinn McBride instead," Joe concluded with a slight smile. "Yes," Katherine agreed, "though I haven't told him any of this. I'm afraid it might change how he sees me." Joe considered this, her head tilted thoughtfully. "Quinn's not one to blame a woman for a man's villainy, but he does value honesty. If you care for him, really care for him, you should tell him the truth." Katherine knew Joe was right. The longer she waited, the harder it would be to explain why she had kept silent. "I will," she promised. Soon, Joe seemed satisfied with this. She finished her coffee and stood. "Well, I should head back. Tell Quinn I stopped by, will you? And that the fence along our shared boundary needs fixing before my bulls decide his heifers look attractive." Katherine laughed, rising to walk Joe to the door. "I'll tell him." At the door, Joe paused, turning back to Katherine. "For what it's worth, I think you'd be good for him. He needs someone who sees beyond the ranch owner to the man underneath." She settled her hat back on her head. "And this country needs more women with backbone. Consider that teaching position in Rivercrest. We could use someone to educate these frontier children properly." "I will," Katherine promised. "Thank you for stopping by, Joe." As Joe rode away, Katherine felt lighter somehow. Sharing her story had been easier than she expected, and Joe's matter-of-fact acceptance gave her hope that Quinn might react similarly. She resolved to tell him everything that very evening. But when Quinn returned, tired and mud splattered from a day spent with fractious cattle, the moment never seemed right. He was preoccupied with ranch concerns, and Katherine didn't want such an important conversation to be an afterthought. "Tomorrow," she promised herself as she lay in bed that night, "I'll tell him everything tomorrow." The opportunity came sooner than she expected. Katherine woke before dawn to the sound of Quinn moving about downstairs. Curious, she dressed quickly and went down to find him preparing to ride out. "Early start?" she asked, startling him. Quinn turned, his surprise giving way to a warm smile. "Didn't mean to wake you. One of the hands spotted wolves near the north pasture. Thought I'd check it out before they trouble the cattle." "Alone?" Katherine asked, concerned. "Isn't that dangerous?" Quinn's smile turned wry. "Just a precaution. Wolves usually avoid humans, but I'll take my rifle just in case." An impulse seized Katherine. "Could I come with you? I promise to stay out of the way." Quinn looked surprised, then pleased. "You sure it's a fair ride and might be nothing?" "I'm sure," Katherine said firmly. "I'll need 10 minutes to change into my riding clothes." Quinn's eyes softened. "Take your time, I'll saddle Daisy for you." 20 minutes later, they were riding away from the ranch house, the eastern sky just beginning to lighten with the promise of dawn. The air was crisp and clean, filling Katherine's lungs with a freshness she had never experienced in Boston. Quinn rode beside her, occasionally pointing out landmarks or explaining features of the landscape. "That ridge there, that's where I found you during the blizzard," he said as they passed a rocky outcropping. "You were half buried in the snow. For a moment I thought I was too late." Katherine shuddered, remembering the numbing cold. "I don't remember much after falling." "Just the snow and then your voice." Quinn's expression grew serious. "I've never been so scared seeing you like that. You were so pale, so still." He hesitated, then added softly, "I knew right then that I couldn't let you go." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Katherine felt her heart skip a beat. This was the closest Quinn had come to openly declaring his feelings. "Quinn," she began, knowing it was time for the truth, "there's something I need to tell you about why I left Boston." He turned to face her fully, his expression open and attentive. "I'm listening." But before Katherine could continue, a rifle shot cracked through the morning air, startling both their horses. Daisy reared in panic, throwing Katherine from the saddle before Quinn could reach for her reins. She hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. "Katherine," Quinn was off his horse in an instant, kneeling beside her. "Are you hurt?" She gasped for air, unable to speak for a moment. When she could finally breathe again, she managed to shake her head. "Just winded," she wheezed. Quinn's face was pale with concern. "Don't move." "Let me check for injuries." His hands moved gently but efficiently over her limbs, checking for broken bones. Finding none, he helped her sit up slowly. "Easy now," he murmured. "Take your time." Another shot rang out, closer this time, and Quinn's head snapped up. "What the devil? Hunters." Katherine suggested, her voice still shaky. Quinn frowned. "Not on my land, they're not." He helped Katherine to her feet, keeping a supportive arm around her waist. "Can you stand? We need to get to cover." Katherine nodded, leaning on him heavily. Her back and hip throbbed where she had landed, but nothing seemed broken. Quinn led her to a cluster of rocks nearby, then went to retrieve their horses, which had moved several yards away but hadn't bolted completely. "Stay here," he instructed, helping her sit on a relatively flat boulder. "I'm going to see who's shooting on my property." "Be careful," Katherine urged, suddenly afraid. Quinn squeezed her hand reassuringly, then mounted his horse and rode toward the direction of the shots, his rifle ready across his saddle. Katherine watched anxiously as he disappeared over a small rise. The minutes stretched interminably. Katherine strained her ears for any sound of confrontation, but all she heard was the gentle morning breeze rustling through the prairie grass. Her thoughts raced with worry. What if the shooter was hostile? What if Quinn was hurt just as she was considering mounting Daisy and going after him? Quinn reappeared, riding alongside another man. As they drew closer, Katherine could see it was Billy, the stable boy, looking thoroughly chastened. "Found our shooter," Quinn announced as they reached her. Billy here decided to try his hand at hunting without asking permission first. Billy's face was red with embarrassment. "I'm awful sorry, Miss Winters," he mumbled. "Didn't know you and Mr. McBride were riding out this way. Just wanted to get a rabbit for Sarah's stew." Despite her sore body and the scare she'd had, Katherine couldn't help but smile at the boy's contrite expression. "No harm done, Billy, though perhaps next time let someone know where you're planning to hunt." "Yes, madam," Billy agreed fervently. "Mr. McBride already read me the riot act." Quinn dismounted, moving to check on Katherine again. "You sure you're all right? That was quite a fall." "I'll be sore tomorrow," she admitted, "but nothing's broken." Quinn looked relieved but still concerned. "We should head back." "You need to rest, and I need to have a longer talk with young Billy here about gun safety." Billy winced, clearly anticipating a stern lecture. Quinn instructed him to ride ahead and tell Sarah to prepare hot water for a bath for Katherine, to soak away the bruises, he explained. As Billy rode off, Quinn helped Katherine mount Daisy again, his hands gentle but strong at her waist. "I'm sorry our ride was cut short," he said, "and sorrier that you were hurt." "It wasn't your fault," Katherine assured him, "and I'm really not badly injured." Quinn adjusted her stirrups, making sure she was secure in the saddle. "You were about to tell me something," he reminded her. "About Boston," Katherine hesitated. The moment had passed, and her sore body made her reluctant to broach such a difficult topic now. "It can wait until we're back at the ranch," she said. "When we're both comfortable." Quinn studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but I'll hold you to that promise." They rode back to the ranch at a gentle pace, Quinn solicitous of her comfort. By the time they reached the house, Katherine's muscles were protesting vigorously, and she was grateful for Quinn's support as she dismounted. True to her word, Sarah had prepared a hot bath, and Katherine sank into it gratefully, letting the warm water ease her aching body. As she soaked, she thought about what she would say to Quinn. The truth needed to be told, all of it. No more delays, no more excuses. After her bath, Katherine dressed in a simple day dress and went downstairs, determined to find Quinn and finish their conversation. But Sarah met her at the foot of the stairs with unexpected news. "Ryder just came from the Cooper place," she said. "Miss Cooper's best stallion broke through a fence and injured himself badly. She's asking for Mr. McBride's help. He has a way with horses that even the veterinarian can't match." "Is Quinn gone already?" Katherine asked, disappointed. Sarah nodded. "Left as soon as he heard. Said to tell you he's sorry, but Joe wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious." Katherine understood, of course. Neighbors helped neighbors out here. It was how people survived. But she couldn't help feeling that fate was conspiring to prevent her confession. "Did he say when he'd be back?" she asked. "Said not to wait up," Sarah replied. "Could be late, depending on the horse's injuries." Katherine sighed inwardly but nodded. "Well then, I suppose I'll catch up on some reading. Is there anything I can help you with around the house?" Sarah shook her head. "You rest those sore muscles, doctor's orders." At Katherine's surprised look, she added, "Billy told me about your fall. Said you hit the ground hard enough to rattle your teeth." Katherine smiled ruefully. "It wasn't quite that bad, but I will be glad to sit quietly for a while." The day passed slowly. Katherine read for a time, then wrote a long, overdue letter to Eliza in Rivercrest, explaining her delayed arrival and hinting at the unexpected turn her journey had taken. She was careful not to commit herself one way or another. She still didn't know if she would be staying at the McBride Ranch or continuing on to Rivercrest. Everything depended on her conversation with Quinn and his reaction to her past. Evening came, and Quinn still hadn't returned. Katherine ate dinner with Sarah and Billy, the latter still subdued from his morning scolding. After dinner, Katherine tried to focus on her book again, but her mind kept wandering to Quinn, wondering how he was faring with Joe's injured stallion. Around 9 o'clock, Sarah brought her a cup of hot chocolate. "You should get some rest," the housekeeper advised. "Your body needs to heal from that fall." Katherine knew she was right. Her muscles were stiffening by the hour, but she was reluctant to go up to bed without seeing Quinn. "I think I'll wait a little longer," she said. Sarah gave her a knowing look but didn't argue. "I'll leave the kitchen lamp lit for Mr. McBride," she said. "Good night, Miss Winters." "Good night, Sarah." After Sarah retired, the house grew quiet. Catherine tried to read, but her eyelids grew heavy. She must have dozed off because she started awake at the sound of the front door opening. A glance at the clock showed it was past midnight. Quinn entered the sitting room quietly, clearly trying not to wake anyone. He looked exhausted, with smudges of dirt on his face and clothes and dried blood the horses, Catherine presumed, on his shirt sleeves. "Catherine," he said, surprised to find her still up, "you should be in bed." "I wanted to wait for you," she replied, setting aside her book. "How is Joe's stallion?" Quinn sank into the chair opposite her with a weary sigh. "Touch and go. He sliced his leg open pretty badly on a broken fence post. I stitched him up as best I could, but we won't know for a few days if he'll recover fully." He ran a hand through his hair, leaving it standing in disarray. Joe was beside herself. "That horse is her prized breeder." "You look exhausted," Catherine observed gently. Quinn managed a tired smile. "It's been a long day for both of us. How are you feeling? Any pain from your fall?" "Just stiffness," Catherine assured him. "Nothing serious." Quinn nodded, his eyes softening as they rested on her face. "I'm glad. I was worried about you all day." The tenderness in his voice gave Catherine courage. "Quinn, about what I wanted to tell you this morning." He straightened slightly, fatigue giving way to attentiveness. "I'm listening." Catherine took a deep breath and began the story she should have told him weeks ago about her father's death. Her uncle's unwelcome advances, her flight west with little more than the clothes on her back, and her mother's small inheritance. She spoke without embellishment, stating the facts plainly, but omitting nothing essential. When she finished, the sitting room was silent except for the crackling of the fire. Quinn's expression had remained neutral throughout her recitation, giving away nothing of his thoughts. "So," she concluded, her heart pounding, "that's why I came west, to escape a situation that had become intolerable." She hesitated, then added, "I should have told you sooner. I was afraid you might think less of me." Quinn's brow furrowed. "Think less of you?" "Why would I think less of you for escaping a predatory man?" Relief washed over Catherine. "Some would say I should have found another solution, a respectable woman's home perhaps, or a position as a companion to an elderly lady, and lived in constant fear of your uncle finding you." Quinn shook his head. "You did what you had to do to survive, Catherine. There's no shame in that." His understanding brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Quinn leaned forward, his fatigue seemingly forgotten. "Is that why you've been hesitant to stay here?" "Because you thought I'd judge you for your past," Catherine nodded. "Partly, and because I wasn't sure what you wanted from me, whether your invitation to stay was born of pity or something else entirely," Quinn finished for her. He rose from his chair and moved to sit beside her on the sofa, taking her hands in his. "Catherine, from the moment I found you in that blizzard, something changed in me. I didn't save you out of charity or duty, though I would have done so regardless. But from that first day when you opened your eyes and looked at me, I felt as if I'd found something I didn't even know I was missing." Catherine's breath caught at the naked emotion in his voice. "Quinn, let me finish," he said gently. "I've never been good with words, but you deserve to hear this plainly. I love you, Katherine Winters. I love your courage, your intelligence, your kindness. I love the way you listen when I talk about books, the way you've tried to learn about ranch life, the way you treat Sarah and Billy like family." His hands tightened around hers. "I don't care what drove you west. I only care that you're here now and that you might consider staying. Not as my guest, but as my wife." The proposal, so simply stated, left Catherine momentarily speechless. Quinn watched her face anxiously, clearly uncertain of her response. "If it's too soon," he began, "I understand. We've only known each other a few weeks. But I know my own heart, Catherine, and it belongs entirely to you." Catherine found her voice at last. "It's not too soon," she said softly, "not when you know something is right." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his stubbled cheek. "I love you too, Quinn McBride. I think I have since the moment you carried me out of that blizzard." The joy that transformed Quinn's tired face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He drew her into his arms with exquisite gentleness, mindful of her bruises from the fall. His lips found hers in a kiss that was tender yet passionate, conveying all the love and promise that words could not express. When they finally parted, Quinn rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if in prayer. "I never thought I'd find you," he murmured. "My father used to say that some men are lucky enough to find the other half of their soul. I didn't believe him until now." Katherine smiled, her heart so full it felt as if it might burst. "So what happens now?" she asked. Quinn sat back slightly, still holding her hands. "Whatever you want. We can be married right away or wait until you're more settled. You can still teach in Rivercrest if you wish. I'd never ask you to give up your independence." His consideration touched her deeply. Quinn wasn't offering to rescue her or possess her, he was offering partnership, respect, and love. It was everything she had never dared to hope for. "I'd like a small wedding," she decided. "Soon, but not rushed, and yes, I would like to teach at least until we start a family." The thought of children, Quinn's children, filled her with unexpected longing. "Would that be all right with you?" Quinn's smile was answer enough, but he spoke the words she needed to hear. "More than all right, it would be perfect." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I love you, Katherine. Whatever makes you happy makes me happy." As they sat together in the quiet of the night, making plans for their shared future, Katherine marveled at the twist of fate that had brought her to this moment. A blizzard that should have killed her had instead led her to the greatest love of her life. She had ridden west seeking escape, only to find home in the arms of a Wyoming rancher. Outside, the stars shone in a clear sky, no trace remaining of the storm that had nearly claimed her life. Like the weather, Katherine's future had transformed from bleak to brilliant in the space of a few short weeks. As Quinn held her close, his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her ear, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "When I was half frozen in that blizzard," she murmured, "I thought I was going to die. I never imagined I was actually on my way to beginning my life." Quinn pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Sometimes the worst storms lead us to the safest harbors," he said softly. "And I'm mighty glad this one led you to me." As the fire burned low in the hearth, Katherine and Quinn remained wrapped in each other's arms, their love a warmth more enduring than any flame, their future stretching before them like the vast Wyoming sky, boundless, bright, and full of promise. 3 months later, on a perfect June morning, Katherine Winters became Katherine McBride in a simple ceremony at the small church in Rivercrest. Joe Cooper stood as her bridesmaid, while Dr. Reynolds, who had become a good friend to them both, stood as Quinn's best man. Sarah had outdone herself with a wedding feast that the townsfolk would talk about for years, and Billy had polished Quinn's boots to a mirror shine for the occasion. After the ceremony, Quinn surprised Katherine by taking her to a ridge overlooking the ranch, the very spot where he had found her during the blizzard. But now, instead of a howling wasteland of snow, it was a vista of rolling green hills dotted with wildflowers, the ranch buildings nestled in the valley below like a painting. "I thought we should come full circle," Quinn explained, helping her down from the wagon. "From the day I found you to the day you became my wife." Katherine squeezed his hand, overcome with emotion. "It's perfect." As they stood together looking out over what was now their shared land, Katherine thought about the journey that had brought her here, not just the physical journey from Boston to Wyoming, but the emotional one from fear to love, from uncertainty to belonging. "I start teaching in September," she said, still hardly able to believe her good fortune. The Rivercrest School Board had been delighted to hire an educated Easterner as their teacher, especially one married to a respected local rancher. "The children will love you," Quinn assured her. "And I'll have you all to myself during the summer months." Katherine smiled up at him, her heart full. "I can't think of a better arrangement." Quinn drew her into his arms, his face solemn but his eyes bright with love. "Are you happy, Mrs. McBride?" "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she replied honestly. "And you?" His answer was a kiss that left no doubt of his feelings, a kiss that spoke of deep contentment, abiding love, and the promise of a lifetime together. As they drove back to the ranch and the wedding celebration that awaited them, Katherine thought about the seemingly random events that had shaped her destiny: a father's death, an uncle's cruelty, a stagecoach's broken wheel, a blizzard's fury, and a cowboy's timely appearance. What had seemed like misfortune had led her to the greatest blessing of her life. The road ahead would not always be smooth. Life in Wyoming territory demanded resilience and adaptability. There would be harsh winters, dry summers, challenges with the ranch, the everyday trials of building a life together. But with Quinn at her side, Katherine knew she could face whatever came their way. For a woman who had once been stranded in a blizzard, half frozen and alone, Katherine McBride had found something beyond mere survival. She had found warmth, love, and a place to call home, all because a cowboy had found her in the snow and carried her to safety, not just of body, but of heart and soul as well. And as they approached the ranch house, where friends and neighbors waited to celebrate their union, Katherine silently thanked the storm that had nearly taken her life, for it had instead given her everything she had ever wanted, and more than she had ever dared to dream.